Imagine for a second that it's a Tuesday night. You're sitting at your kitchen table, the house is quiet, and you're looking at a piece of paper that says your mortgage balance is exactly $0. Now, most people think that the big change here is just the money, right? They think, oh, I'll have an extra $2,500 a month to play with. And yeah, that's part of it. But that's actually the least interesting thing that happens. What really happens is a shift in the literal chemistry of your brain. Because for the first time in maybe 30 years, the roof over your head isn't a rental agreement with a bank that has a hair trigger temper. You aren't just living in a house anymore. You are standing on your own piece of the earth. And the psychological weight that lifts off your shoulders is something nobody prepares you for. I want you to really sit with that feeling of weight. Most of us walk around with this low-level hum of anxiety in the back of our skulls, and we've lived with it for so long that we don't even notice it's there. It's the what if I lose my job hum. It's the what if the economy craters and I can't make the payment hum. When that house is paid off, that hum just stops. It's like living next to a construction site for 2 decades, and then suddenly, one afternoon, they pack up the jackhammers and leave. The silence is actually shocking. You start to realize that every decision you've made for the last 20 years, which job to take, how much to argue with your boss, whether or not you can afford the good organic apples, has been filtered through the lens of, I must keep the bank happy so they don't take my bet away. My name is Jack, and I spend way too much time thinking about the invisible scripts we run our lives by, and why some people seem to find this incredible sense of peace, while others spend their entire lives sprinting on a treadmill that never actually ends. Today, we're talking about the moment the treadmill stops. We're talking about why everything changes the second you own your home outright. If you're into digging deep into the psychology of money and how it actually affects your soul, hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It helps me keep these deep dives going without the corporate fluff. The hidden problem here isn't that mortgages are bad. I'm not some extremist who says you're a failure if you have a loan. That's just not reality for most of us. The hidden problem is the subconscious lease on your life. Think about the last time you were at the grocery store. You're looking at a steak that's $25 and you put it back and grab the $12 chicken instead. You tell yourself you're being frugal. But if you look deeper, your brain is doing a calculation. If I spend too much here, and then the utility bill is high, and then the car needs a tire, am I cutting it too close for the first of the month? Even when you have plenty of money in the bank, the mortgage acts as a floor for your stress. It's a baseline level of mandatory output that dictates your level of risk-taking. This hidden problem shows up most clearly at your 9-to-5. When you owe the bank $400,000, you are, in a very real sense, a more compliant employee. You might not speak up when a project is going off the rails. You might stay in a toxic environment 6 months longer than you should. Why? Because the bank doesn't care about your work-life balance or your mental health. They want their $2,500 on the first of the month, every month until the year 2054. Your mortgage is essentially a leash held by a corporation that doesn't know your name. When you pay that off, you're not just saving interest, you're buying back the right to say no without your heart rate hitting 120 beats per minute. And yes, I mean that literally.
Now, let's talk about what's actually happening inside your head, because this is where the neuroscience of money gets really wild. Your brain has this ancient part called the amygdala. It's basically your internal security guard. Its only job is to scan the horizon for tigers. But in 2026, the tiger isn't a predator in the bushes. It's the $350,000 balance on your mortgage statement. When you owe that much money, your brain stays in a state of low-grade survival mode. You're constantly dripping cortisol into your system because deep down, your subconscious knows that your primary shelter, your cave, is conditional. You don't actually own the cave. The tribe, or in this case, the bank, lets you stay there as long as you hunt enough units of currency every single month. This leads to something called decision fatigue. Every time you make a financial choice, you're using up a finite amount of mental energy. When you have a massive mortgage hanging over you, Every single spending decision is weighted against that giant monthly obligation. Can I afford this $800 car repair? Isn't just about the $800. It's about the $800 plus the $2,800 mortgage due in 10 days. Your brain is constantly running these background checks and balances, and it's exhausting. It's like trying to run a high-end laptop with 50 Chrome tabs open in the background. Everything feels a little slower, a little glitchier, and you're much more likely to crash, or in human terms, burn out. Let's get into the math, because the numbers here are frankly staggering. Most people look at a $400,000 mortgage at a 6% interest rate and think, okay, I'll pay back $400,000 plus a bit of interest. No. Over 30 years, that $400,000 house actually cost you about $863,000. You are literally buying one house for yourself and another slightly nicer house for the bank's shareholders. Think about that. You are working 40 hours a week, and for roughly 15 of those hours every single week for 30 years, you are working for a bank executive you've never met. When you pay that house off, you aren't just saving money. You are reclaiming 15 hours of your life every week forever. Imagine scenario A. You keep the 30-year mortgage and invest the extra cash. Maybe you come out ahead on paper by 1 or 2% if the market is perfect. But look at scenario B. You aggressively pay it off in 12 years. By year 13, your mandatory cost of living drops by, say, $2,800 a month. That is $33,600 a year in after-tax money that you no longer need to earn just to exist. To get $33,600 in spending power from a job, you'd usually have to earn about $45,000 or $50,000 before taxes. Suddenly, you don't need a 6-figure salary to live a 6-figure lifestyle. The math of a paid-off home is the ultimate life hack because it lowers your freedom threshold, the amount of money you need to stop doing things you hate, by nearly 50% for most families.
This brings us to the identity shift. This is the part no one talks about at dinner parties. When you don't owe anyone for the roof over your head, your internal status changes. You stop seeing yourself as a debtor or a tenant with benefits, and you start seeing yourself as a proprietor. It changes the way you walk into a room. When you go into a salary negotiation or a meeting with a difficult client, you aren't coming from a place of, I need this check to survive. You're coming from a place of, I'm here because I want to be here. That shift in leverage is worth more than any 7% return in the S&P 500. You become a person who cannot be easily coerced. And in a world that thrives on coercing people through their bills, that makes you a very powerful and very dangerous individual. And yes, I mean that in the best way possible. Let's walk through some real-world whiteboard scenarios to see how this actually plays out in your day-to-day life. Scenario 1. It's a Monday morning, and your car's transmission decides to quit. That's a $4,000 problem. For most people with a mortgage, that $4,000 feels like a house fire. You're checking credit card limits, you're stressed at dinner, and you're wondering which bill gets pushed to next month. But when the house is paid off, that $2,800 you used to send to the bank is just sitting there in your checking account from last month. The emergency becomes a minor inconvenience. You just write the check, and your blood pressure doesn't even move. Scenario 2. Your company announces restructuring, which is just corporate speak for we're firing people. Your coworkers are panicking in the break room, calculating how many months of unemployment they have before the bank starts calling. You're eating your sandwich because you realize that without a mortgage, your survival number, the bare minimum you need to keep the lights on and the fridge full, is probably only $1,500 a month. You could deliver pizzas or work at a bookstore and still keep your home. This isn't just financial planning, it's a structural change to your relationship with fear. Now, for the counterintuitive twist that most financial gurus will hate me for saying, paying off your house is actually the best investment you can make, even if the math on a spreadsheet says otherwise. People will scream, but Jack, the market returns 8% and my mortgage is only 4%. Okay, fine. But tell me, can you spend the 4% spread to buy a night of deep, uninterrupted sleep? Can you use that 4% arbitrage to quit a job that's killing your soul? The spread is a mathematical truth, but it's a psychological lie,
Because wealth isn't just the number at the bottom of your brokerage statement. Wealth is the ability to ignore the world's demands on your time. When you prioritize the math over the peace of mind, you are betting that you will be a perfectly rational robot for 30 years. But you aren't a robot. You're a human being who gets tired, who gets sick, and who occasionally wants to tell a toxic boss to go fly a kite. By keeping the mortgage to invest the difference, you are keeping the leash on your neck for an extra 2 decades just to chase a few percentage points of maybe money. The twist is that the most efficient move is often the one that makes you feel the most secure, because security is the foundation of all future growth. This security spills over into your emotional and social angle in ways you'd never expect. Think about your relationships. Money is the #1 cause of divorce, and at the heart of most money fights is scarcity stress. When the house is paid off, the scarcity disappears. You and your spouse aren't fighting about the $200 Target run because the big monster in the room, the mortgage, has been slain. You walk into a room differently. You aren't hungry for approval or desperate for the next promotion. You have a quiet confidence because you know that no matter what happens in the world, wars, recessions, or pandemics, you have a fortress that belongs to you. So, how do we get there? Here is the roadmap. Step 1, you have to find the gap. This is the difference between what you earn and what you spend. If you don't have a gap, you don't have a path. Step 2, you don't wait for extra money at the end of the month. You automate one extra principal payment. If your mortgage is $2,000, you set up an automatic transfer for $2,200. That extra $200 feels like nothing now, but it chops years off the back end. And yes, I mean that years. Step 3, every raise, every tax refund, every found dollar goes into the house until the balance hits 0.
Paying off your house is the ultimate act of rebellion in a consumer culture that wants you to stay in debt forever. It's a declaration that you are done being a resident of someone else's balance sheet. It's hard, it's boring, and it takes a long time. But the day you make that final payment, you'll realize that the house didn't just get bigger, the whole world did. My name is Jack. Go do the math, find your peace, and I'll see you in the next one. The final stage of this journey isn't a financial one. It's a lifestyle pivot. When that $2,500 or $3,000 a month stays in your pocket, you finally get to ask the question most adults haven't asked since they were 10 years old. What do I actually want to do today? For most of your life, the answer was whatever keeps the mortgage paid. Now, the answer can be whatever makes me feel alive. You might start that business you've been dreaming about for a decade. You might take a job that pays 20% less, but gives you 50% more time with your kids. You might just sit on your porch and drink a coffee without the nagging guilt that you should be grinding harder. This is the ultimate close. It's motivational, sure, but it's grounded in the cold, hard reality of the math we just did. You aren't hoping for a better life. You are literally building a structural foundation that makes a better life inevitable. You are taking the most expensive, most stressful part of being a human, finding shelter, and you are solving it permanently. No fake hype, no get-rich-quick schemes. Just a steady, relentless march toward the day the bank sends you that piece of paper. And when they do, you'll realize that you didn't just pay off a house. You bought yourself a lifetime of Tuesdays where you don't owe a single person a single thing. And yes, I mean that literally.